The elephant in the room in Web3 is that there is a lack of diversity within the highest levels of influence. It lacks intersectionality. Intersectionality is the confluence of race, gender, sexuality, etc., that is needed to create equality for all in society. Now, we can debate the presence of optics versus meritocracy, but the fact remains that the demographics in the blockchain are not as diverse as the rest of society, particularly at the highest levels of power. Let's get into why this could be the case from both a contemporary and historical perspective. My next guest, Ben Samaroo, is co-founder and CEO of Canadian powerhouse Wonderfi and can help us shed some light on this controversial topic. Ben, welcome to the Daily Drop.
Bobby, great to be here.
Yeah, I'm happy to have you for such an important issue, and you're such a respected member of the community. And as a prominent leader in the cryptocurrency space, how much diversity do you see in the blockchain?
There's a lot of initiatives that are helping with diversity in the crypto and blockchain space, and we're seeing it particularly with women in the industry coming together, typically coming from technology more broadly, the tech sector, and focusing on Web3 as something that has a lot of high potential. So there's a really good amount of kind of organization and effort around that. But the fact of the matter remains that just like broader tech sector and I think just business in general, there are many different groups that are very underrepresented, and I think this underrepresentation poses unique issues within Web3, given a lot of the objectives, the underlying objectives of why this technology is important, which all really comes down to equal access to financial opportunities and really equal access in general. And so that representation is so key because of what this sector promises to overcome.
Oh, 100%, right? I mean, it's supposed to democratize really the entire world, right? So, but okay, before we get into why, because it is a complex answer and really the point of the whole show. But so, how valuable is intersectionality at providing that view, that broader view of the entire Web3 ecosystem?
I think it's critical because the stage that we're at is a lot of the focus and a lot of the capital and energy that's being spent in the Web3 space is still around early adopters. And a lot of that is in developed markets where people are investing to make money. And there's nothing wrong with that. That drives, a number of different markets and economies. And that's critical. And what we're starting to see more of is the use of this technology in developing markets where we're able to provide access to things like stable currencies, where residents or citizens of that jurisdiction might not have access to that currently, given
Mhm.
political climate and what their currency looks like, what their local currency looks like at the time. That's one example, but that sort of intersectionality and representation piece allows more investment to happen in those particular areas, which are outside of me or you being able to make a 2 or 3 or 4x on our investment in
Mhm.
Bitcoin, which, while that's great for us, doesn't really solve some of these underlying issues that Web3 and blockchain can uniquely solve. Whereas there's other asset classes and things like that that can provide these types of returns. But this is the unique value that this offers.
Well, look, and I mean, we're going to get deep into the history of it, and I mean, it's such an important issue. I'm glad you came here. I really do appreciate it. Look, we only have a minute before we get to the break, but you're right at the top, man. Like you run like one of the most powerful crypto companies in the world, but you also understand the challenges, right? Like why do we have these challenges still?
I'm still trying to figure that out. And what I've found, so I'm one of the very few people of color in a CEO role of a TSX listed company, which your Canadian viewers will be familiar with the TSX, but for those in other places, it's the 10th largest exchange in the world, and home of some of the most some extremely successful companies. Being one of the very few people in this role, I feel that it's definitely a good step forward in terms of representation, but what I'm finding is something that I think a lot of people of color and women have been saying for a long time, and I'm now
Mm.
just experiencing it firsthand, which is that it's
So
great
sorry,
to
sorry,
be.
Ben. Let's get
Oh,
into that after the break because it's like we're going
yeah,
right to
sure.
commercial, and it's so important what
Okay,
you're saying. Okay, so
okay.
we got Ben Samaroo here on the Daily Drop. Welcome back to the Daily Drop. I'm here with Ben Samaroo, Wonderfi. Okay, so I asked you before the break, but I want to give you the time to really answer it because you're really in a unique position to sort of understand and articulate the challenges here, right? Like, why don't we have? And let's stay focused on multiculturalism, people of color specifically. Why is that so difficult to get that representation at the highest levels of power in the blockchain?
So I think that challenge exists in blockchain, it exists in tech, it exists in just the corporate world in general. And I think that it's it layers back, many generations. I think that like for example, for me, my family, my parents were not university educated, and so there's barriers and obstacles that come in being able to get into a position like this, and that's not unique to me. But I think the interesting thing is, even as we get representation in roles like this, the big challenge is that I'm facing is that you become part of a statistic that somebody can use, which is great because it shows
Mm.
there's diversity at board levels and executives. But when it comes time to actually speak about the unique issues that you bring to the table as a person of color, or maybe as a woman or another underrepresented group, it's very difficult to be heard about those. And so that's really grateful to be able to speak to you on your channel about this, because what I'm finding is that in a lot of different media, people, and even just in the corporate environment, people don't want to hear about the issues that people of color have to bring to the table. And when you think about what is the reason for representation, it's not just to make people feel good about, oh, we've got black people and brown people and this and that. It's so that you can be representative of the population. And so to me, it's a really frustrating thing, and something that I'm learning that a lot of other people that have been in my position and others have been talking about for a long time.
And look, I mean, I appreciate you taking this stand. To be honest, I mean, one thing you probably don't know about me is I have a like a multi-decade background as an activist, right? Like
Mm,
fighting for people of color, giving people jobs. So I really appreciate your perspective. But also, it is complex,
mm,
right? And you would know this better than anyone because you're running, like one of the biggest companies in crypto in the world, right? Also,
mm.
I love Kevin O'Leary. That guy's
Yeah,
awesome.
yeah.
But okay, let's go a little bit back to so Canada. We're Canadian, right? But Canada's relationship with England, so we can understand a bit about the monarchy and how these things bleed into a culture. So, what do you think of that relationship between Canada and England, like historically?
It's so my views of that have changed over time as I've gotten more educated. So I was actually born in England. My parents, my family moved to Canada. I was very young, like 2 or 3 years old. So um, I I it used to be something that I was really proud of, having this connection to Britain. And then as I learned more about my family history and what Britain has done to my ancestors very recently. I'm not talking hundreds and hundreds of years ago. It is, I mean, it's atrocious, and again, not something that's unique to my family or that group of people. It's millions and millions of Canadians have been oppressed and just harmed, irreparably harmed by the British. And I think it's something that is not really very well known for a lot of Canadians. Like, I didn't learn that growing up. It's something I had to sort of investigate on my own, and it's really changed my perspective on Canada's connection to Britain. And the last thing I'll say is yeah, I think with the Queen's passing and the transition of the monarchy, for a lot of people of color and for people that have come from nations and areas that have been colonized by Britain, it's bringing up a lot of deep rooted things that a lot of us didn't even know that were there before.
Yeah, look, I mean, it's really complex, and we're going to go to break in a bit. because there's more, right? It's not just that, because also Canada has its own history of atrocities toward the Indigenous, and we'll get into that as well. But it's an important topic. I will say we are going to focus this conversation on solutions by the end, but I do think it's important to really face this reality head on in a way that I think the world in general, but Canada in particular, doesn't seem to want to address. But Ben, look, I really do appreciate you. We're going to go to break. We've got more with Ben Samaroo here on the Daily Job. Welcome back to the Daily Drop. Okay, so look, this is, to be honest, like the most sort of intense episode I've done, but also the most honest, and I think something that really helps everybody. But we're going to get into a bit deeper, okay? So we're talking about intersectionality in the blockchain, but we're here in Canada, and look, Canada, quite frankly, has a very disgusting history with residential schools, okay? So I guess my question for you is, knowing all that, right, plus this relationship with England, all these sort of historical atrocities as the foundation, do you think that systemic racism is deeply embedded into Canadian culture?
I think so. First, I'll say I'm definitely not an expert in any of this, and I know there's a lot of different perspectives on this. I think my view is with the treatment of Indigenous people, and just even Canada's origination. Some of these things are just part of our DNA, and that doesn't mean that there's no path forward, but it's something that needs to be recognized. And I think what a lot of people struggle to understand, and I'm experiencing it firsthand, is that it's not necessarily a lot of things that need to happen for um, people to start feeling some sense of reconciliation. And I'm not speaking on behalf of any group, Indigenous or people of color, but speaking for myself, I think that even a sense of acknowledgement of things that have happened goes a long way. And you do see that happening with different groups in Canada, which I think is very positive. But for example, the opposite effect of that that I've seen is with King Charles being proclaimed as king of the monarch of Canada. That brought up all these feelings of this is this is an empire that has caused so much harm, and we're not even taking a moment to hear the voices of Canadians that have been affected by by this, and I think that's really the wrong move. And so I think this is part of our beautiful makeup, is how diverse and multicultural we are. And so I think we need to listen to the voices of the people within Canada.
Yeah, look, and I appreciate you, being part of this conversation, because it's an important conversation. And look, I have a television show, and I look for world experts, and I do get them, but it is very difficult to find people of color, women, people from the LGBTQ plus community. I don't know, like why is that? Because we have. Yeah.
I can answer that.
Right.
Because people are scared to speak out about these issues, and I can say that because I feel like I've been in that position where if you're on a certain path in your career, or whatever it is, it's as a person of color, as an underrepresented group, as a woman, you really need to fit a mold to be able to get to certain levels. And the more that you stray from that, the higher the risk is that you get ignored or you get booted out. And so I think it's a really interesting dichotomy, because it's a bit of self-preservation at play, where you're thinking, okay, I just need to advance and get there, and then at the same time you're going through these different levels of of business in the world, or whatever it is that you're doing, and seeing all these injustices and all this inequity, and you and if you're at all aware of that, then you're really being pulled to speak out about that. So I think there's I think there's people that I look to who have done that historically and who I think are doing a really good job of that now. So I think we're like in terms of solutions, I think we are seeing platforms like yours that are giving voices to people that are willing to take that stand and willing to share that message. And I think honestly, that's a big step forward.
Well, thank you, but also you to have the courage to do it. We're going to get into solutions after the break because I do think that is the most important part of this whole episode. But just yes or no, because we only have like 30 seconds. But do you think that if you didn't have the status, quite frankly, the power that you have now, that you would even be talking about this on this show?
I can say for sure I would not be heard.
Wow.
uh, and I can say that because
You know what?
I've
Let's just that's that
sure
alone. The fact that you
yeah.
said no, right?
Mhm.
And you're being honest and raw. Um, I mean that kind of says it all, doesn't
That's
it?
it.
We've got Ben
It does.
Samaroo here on the Daily Drop. Welcome back to the Daily Drop. Ben, it's funny because I do this, after every break. I'm like, welcome back to the Daily Drop. I do this little point thing. But it felt different this time because I don't know, I'm affected when you were like, no. It was so simple. And I'm like, we have like one of the most powerful crypto CEOs in the entire world, right, on this program. And if you didn't have that as a person of color, you wouldn't say anything. And then I go, well, how many other people are remaining silent? And this is why it's such a challenge, right? So look, these are the realities. We have to talk about them without blame, but so we can really honestly assess what's going on. But now I'm on to solutions. So what can we do? And I don't know, I don't expect you to know everything, but what can we do as a community to affect positive change regarding intersectionality in the blockchain?
One thing that is critical, so very complex issue, obviously. I think one thing that's critical is being able to, so it's this issue of sponsorship is the word, and it's fairly new to me. I'm still learning about all of this and representation. There's a lot of experts in this area, but have worked with a group that has done a lot of research on this is more gender representation in board and executive roles. And really the biggest issue for women being able to get represented and getting into these senior leadership and board roles is sponsorship. And that means having somebody who will who will back them and sort of go out on a limb to to recommend them and to take the time to to uh, give information about them to to companies that are looking for people in that role. And so it seems really simple, but at the end of the day, it comes back to advocacy and being able to speak for people that that are underrepresented. And so I think sponsorship is a key part from what I understand.
So let me ask you a question. So, because I've been in the film industry like since the '90s, okay, and I've done a lot of advocacy, and there've been so many initiatives. I now work in Hollywood, all these things, right? There's actually quite a lot of initiatives, even though like intersectionality is still a challenge in Hollywood, but it is I think ahead of the blockchain because when I got into the crypto space, one of my first observations was, oh wow, like there's some real challenges here from an intersectional standpoint. Are there like formalized, like you're talking about sponsorship, but are there programs, are there initiatives? Is this really a thing you're not really supposed to talk about because you don't want to make waves?
There's definitely some good groups that are focused around women in Web3. I see that for sure. And then, but at the end of the day, it does come down to putting your money where your mouth is. And for example, one process, and not to, I'm not patting us on the back, but one of the things that when we brought Kevin O'Leary on board, one of the first things he said to me is, "How many women do you have on your board?" And he said, "You need representation." And for him, it wasn't, "Hey, you need numbers." It was, "You need perspectives. This is a global business. This is Web3. this is a crucial part of this. And so I'm embarrassed to say that at the time I went through my Rolodex, and I was like, I don't have that many women to call on. And so what I did was started just reaching out. I did like cold calls to a bunch of people either in the industry or in the traditional finance industry. And what I did find was a lot of women do lean into this sponsorship piece, which is I got tons of recommendations of amazing women with a ton of experience. And I'm proud to say now that our board, it's majority women, it's chaired by a woman, and I think there's a lot of benefits to that, particularly in this Web3 industry.
Um, we need to do like a 39-hour show, and we have 20 seconds left. So let's connect offline. Please come back again. But I want to help. I want to be involved. This is important to me as well. I'm half Chinese. This is my whole life. So look, Ben, I appreciate you. I appreciate you coming, and thank you for coming to the Daily Job.
Thanks for having me, Bobby.
History has an impact. You see it in the everyday patterns that constitute society. And while we cannot dwell on the past, we do need to confront historical injustices so we may learn from the past. I'm a positive person. I believe people are ultimately good at their core, but I also know that those who do not learn from the mistakes of their history are bound to repeat them. We'll see you next time on The Daily Job.